How does volume affect listener fatigue? Mike from Brossard, Canada. And Mike writes, it's a known fact that although Bryston's, and Bryston, by the way, is a Canadian amplifier line, they've been around forever, they have a lifetime guarantee, they're a good company. Anyway, it's a known fact that although Bryston's are very clean, they do sound a bit bright. I usually listen to classical music, but in certain cases, I have no choice but to keep the volume at 3 o'clock for a comfortable listen at the detriment of not having the whole orchestra come up to full volume. If I happen to raise the volume to about 11 o'clock, I get fatigued after a while. My wife thinks I need to have my ears checked. Me, on the other hand, I think I should maybe switch to a different brand of speakers to compensate for that extra brightness that the Bryston loudspeakers are known for. And yes, Bryston makes speakers and electronics, and I don't have an opinion on the brightness. But let's assume that Mike is, well, he knows his speakers, right? So they're a little bright, and as he turns it up, it gets fatiguing. Well, first off, I don't think you need to have your ears checked. I think your ears are pretty good. We know within a room, we know when something is fatiguing and tiring, and it's one of the worst maladies of what we do when things aren't right and you can't crank it up. Because here's Paul's theory on volume level, and I think I've expressed this before, but it's always worth repeating. Every track within a room in a given set of circumstances has a perfect volume. Every single track. And they're all different, right? So years ago, I used to write within my space in Music Room 1, I would write the exact volume that it should be played at for a given number of people in the room. So if there was 1 or 2 people in the room, you'd play it at volume 35. Or 40, whatever it was. And it was written right on there. And I told people, for every person that gets added to the room, and every person that's added to the room damps down the sound a little bit and absorbs some of the sound, then you need to go up, from 35 to 37, 38, whatever. And I was very particular about this, and I spent a lot of time cataloging it. I later learned that, once we got a server and we got so many tracks to deal with, that it was just impossible to keep up with it. And that's when the crew here, I started training them to learn how to find the right volume level, okay? And I'll give you a brief little intro into how I teach our people at shows and whatnot to know when it's the right level. It's particularly easy with voices. When you play a vocal on a pair of loudspeakers and the volume is too high, the voice will get too big. It'll become an unnatural size. And the opposite's true if it's too low. Hearing when it's too low is usually pretty easy, because too low, it's kind of recessed too far back. Nothing sounds particularly, exciting or right. And then you start cranking the volume up, and all of a sudden the voice gets to this point where it's a real person. It's the size of a real person. And if you keep turning it up, whether it be a person or an instrument, you can have cellos, that are this big, they're huge. Turn the volume down, and then they'll get to the right size. So that's one of there's a number of things. This isn't something you can just learn in 30 seconds on a video, but I can give you a taste of what it's all about. Having said that every piece has a perfect volume level, which is in fact true. Mike's problem is that when he cranks it up to that proper volume level, especially for an orchestral piece where, you want the orchestra to take over the room as it would if you were sitting in the concert, and it gets too bright and it gets fatiguing, it's time to change those speakers, it's time to change those electronics or your cables, whatever's causing that problem, because that is one of the reasons why I tell people all the time, get those doggone speakers right. If those speakers aren't working for you, there's some speakers I'm not a fan of B&W loudspeakers. I've never heard Bryston, so I don't know. I don't buy B&W loudspeakers because they have some of that effect. Now, I've heard B&W speakers set up properly. and they can work, and I can listen to them and be okay with them, but we all have our preferences, right? You might like focals, and you might like magnaplaners, and you might like, my speakers. But in general, when you get a synergistic system together where the speakers are working right within the room and are synergistic with the electronics, there's no reason to not be able to crank that sucker up to the appropriate volume level for a given piece of music, and it shouldn't sound worse or fatiguing. It should sound correct and glorious. Your ears are fine. Your wife is wrong. Go out and get yourself a new pair of speakers. Good luck, Mike. Bye.